All right, welcome to Husker Storm Blog. This is it. The regular season's over. That was it. Week 14 finished up. So this week we will talk about just a quick overview of the BCS Bowls. Of course, we'll talk about last week, championship week, some good championship games. Besides one, the Big Ten championship was awful. Nebraska fell flat on their face. So I'm not going to rant yet. I'll do that at the end so people can stop watching the video who aren't Nebraska fans. Otherwise, we'll talk about Week 14. Talk about the Heisman. I don't have a top 25 this week. But let's get started on the conference champion. Actually, let's get started on the conference championship games. So, it started off Thursday. That was pretty much the conference championship game, Louisville versus Rutgers. I predicted the game to be 16-14. The final was a great comeback by Louisville. Teddy Bridgewater had a broken wrist, and he had an injured leg too. And somehow, some way, was able to get his team a comeback there. Just an exceptional athlete, an exceptional quarterback. That team's a team to watch out in the future. They're young this year. They will be facing Florida in the Sugar Bowl. I wouldn't give them a whole lot of a chance there. But it's a young team, and they've got the talent. It's a matter of Charlie Strong looks like he's probably going to be going to Tennessee. Looks like Tennessee has him number one on their list. He did interview for that job, so it looks like there's a good possibility he'll be gone there. I predicted that game to be 16-14. The final score was 2017. Louisville did the job, and that was one of the conference champions I predicted at the beginning of the year, and it was correct. I only predicted 2 conference champions correct. So, not a very good year in terms of predicting conference champions. The other games, you had Friday, you had the MAC. NIU versus Kent State. Kent State had a great comeback at the end of the game, but fell short. Jordan Lynch was just too much. I was rooting for Northern Illinois because I thought if Northern Illinois were to beat Kent State would not be in a BCS Bowl. Well, figured out, it ended up coming out that Northern Illinois gets into a BCS Bowl. So, it's just the BCS Bowl, the BCS sucking again. It's typical. It's sucked its whole entire existence, and now we're probably going to have to see another blowout. They are playing a Florida State team who wasn't all that impressive in their championship game and are far from back. Yeah, I said that, Florida State fans. Just because you won a little ACC championship, who gives a crap? That's a terrible conference. It's a crappy conference. You had what? I think there were 6 bowl teams from the ACC. Let's take a look. The ACC had a total of 6 bowl teams. 6. How many members are in your conference? 12. That's half of your conference. Okay, they had 7 if you want to count Miami. 7 is not acceptable. And you only play 8 conference games. It's not like the Pac-12. You're playing 9. Pac-12 is allowed to have a team short. The Big Ten and the SEC usually have around 9 teams, and the Pac-12 usually has. Well, actually, Pac-12 usually sucks it. They usually have 6. This year they got 8, which that's about where they should be at for a conference that plays 9 conference games. What else did we have? So we had the Pac-12 championship, of course, Stanford and UCLA. I said it was going to be closer, and I predicted the score exactly correct. I said 27-24. Guess what the final score was? 27-24. UCLA missed a winning or tying field goal, 52-yarder, and Stanford got the win. Like I thought, it was close. Great game. Stanford will be in the Rose Bowl for the first time since, I believe, 2000. That was a great game. Great year for UCLA. Great year. 9-4 is a huge improvement from 6-6, and the future is bright for that team. They're young on defense. They've got a young quarterback. They've got some young talent on the offensive line and out wide too. So it's just a matter of filling in for Jonathan Franklin. But that team could definitely win the South the next 4 years. Let's talk about Saturday. Saturday, it really started off with, what do we have? Baylor defeated Oklahoma State. Kansas State smashed Texas. And then we do have some conference championship games that we'll get to. I believe that was actually all the major games. Oklahoma beat TCU. But the SEC championship game. What a game. What a game. Two great teams. They're not elite. They didn't smash good teams that they played, besides maybe Alabama. But they are great teams. There's no elite teams this year. They're great teams. They're both on good sides of They're both on good sides of the ball. They have their struggles on both sides of the ball, though. They're not perfect in any way. And poor clock management by Mark Richt there. You got to spike it. Give yourself at least 2 plays. And Todd Gurley has got to bat that ball down. You cannot catch that. And Aaron Murray, he played well, but just wasn't able to finish it off. And I really think if they would have spiked the ball there, they would have had 2 plays. They would have had 2 plays for sure, no matter what. Unless he pulls a Colt McCoy and they add a second back on the clock. But, you would have got 2 plays. You could have dialed up a play there. But they didn't. They rushed it. It was just poor decision-making, and it cost them a national championship opportunity. And now they're going to go play in the Capital One Bowl against Nebraska, which that's a motivation bowl right there. We had the ACC championship, and all over the place, especially Bleacher Report, you see, hey, Florida State's back. They won the ACC for the first time since like 2004. Well, you won the freaking ACC. You know how many BCS bowl games the ACC's won since like 2004? 0. I mean, the closest one they were involved in was Michigan last year, which Michigan shouldn't have been in a BCS bowl game last year. Big deal. You beat a mediocre 6-6 team that has a terrible defense by 6 points. You only had 330 yards of offense against Georgia Tech. You should be putting up 700 yards of offense and scoring 60 points and winning that game by 40 points. If you want to call yourself a top 10 team, I mean, the recruiting classes that you're putting out there, it's not acceptable to have this. A good team. They're a good team. There's no question about that. They're a good team, the best team in the ACC, a crappy conference, the ACC. But they're not great, and they're nowhere near elite. And, now they got to refuel their quarterback there, which, they got some great depth. I want to see Jameis Winston. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I don't know. But that kid's going to be a stud. We'll see if he can get the starting job. Might be Trinket. He's played a couple games, especially last year. He'll be a junior, I believe. But that wasn't impressive at all. I mean, that Georgia Tech team 6-6 in the ACC for a reason, and we saw what a close to elite team in Georgia, a great team, did to that average team, that mediocre team. They beat them 42-10. That's what you got to do, Florida State, and you didn't. I don't care if it's a championship game. That was a rivalry game. That game meant a lot to Georgia Tech. Yeah, the championship game meant more, but come on, that's unacceptable. I don't think Jimbo's that great of a coach. We'll see how long he lasts. I think he's a lot like Bo Pelini. He's going to get that team, except he plays in a worse conference, so it's a lot easier to get to a BCS bowl game. So he's going to have that team as a good team, a team that's winning 9-10 games a year. Well, actually, they haven't been under him, but a team that's winning 9-10 games a year. But they're just not going to get to that second step, that last hurdle. They're not going to get to that national championship. I don't think they will with Jimbo. It's not going to happen. Now let's talk about my Heisman. Actually, let's talk about how I did. So my regular season predictions, I went 115-51. My goal for my percentage at the beginning of this year was 70%. I ended with 69%, 693. So that's a pretty damn good batting average. But I was just short. I still got the bowl games to make it up, and we'll have that video up next Tuesday. So let's talk about the Heisman. It's this Saturday. I thought usually the Heisman had 5 finalists. We only have 3 this year. I don't know. I haven't read into it a whole lot. I really don't care who wins the Heisman this year. I don't think there's any deserving players to win the Heisman this year besides maybe Monte Te'o, but he's not going to win it. He's just not going to. Colin Klein got invited, and of course Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel is probably going to win it, but he's not as deserving as RG3. And he's probably the least deserving winner since I don't know, maybe Eric Crouch. But no, Eric Crouch was actually, he didn't cost his team the loss to Colorado. His offense put up, 36 points or something. His defense was just terrible. He was a lot like Colin Klein. But Colin Klein did not help at all in the loss to Baylor. You throw 3 interceptions. He lost the Heisman there. Now, Johnny Manziel, in the 2 games they lost, he didn't throw a touchdown. RG3, he scored points in the games they lost. It's just they had the worst defense in the country on the field. So there wasn't a whole lot he could do. Johnny Manziel's going to win it just because he had the best stats. He had a great year, no question about it. But a lot of those stats came up against mediocre talent, mediocre teams. He only had 1 good game against a good team, and it was Alabama and Florida and LSU. He was average. And they lost because of that. So I do think Johnny Manziel is going to win it. Second place, I'd say, is Monte Te'o. It's going to be closer than people think, though. I think he's barely going to win it. Receiving a lot of the first place votes, though. Colin Klein will get some first place votes, but he's going to finish 3rd. Probably looking 4th. It's not going to be Braxton Miller, I can tell you that. 4th will probably be Marquise Lee. 5th will probably be Braxton Miller, something like that. But that's it for the Heisman right there. I got Johnny Manziel winning it this Saturday. And what else do we got to talk about before I get to my Nebraska rant? Let's take a quick look at the BCS Bowls. So in the Rose Bowl, Wisconsin versus Stanford. My prediction was Nebraska versus Oregon at the beginning of the year. That was my prediction. Did not come true, not even close. I saw Stanford as a 8-win team at best, and look at they won 11 games so far. They got a good chance to win 12. Wisconsin, I predicted to be 9-3. I was really siding for 7-5. After they did lose to Oregon State, I said they would be 7-5. Look at where they finished, 7-5. 8-5 after they trounced Nebraska. That's going to be an interesting game. Stanford's the favorite, of course, but it's 2 teams that are mirror images of each other. But here's the key deal. Brett Bielema is gone. Brett Bielema is now the coach of Arkansas. And he's got a better chance to win a national championship there. He's playing in the SEC. That's what coaches dream of. He's not going to win a national championship at Wisconsin. It's just not realistic. But he could win one at Arkansas just because he's got the ability to recruit, elite talent down there. You can't really reach down into that south up there in Wisconsin. It's difficult. So there's a better chance to win a national championship. But that Arkansas, they got a lot of rebuilding to do there. He will coach in the bowl game supposedly, but I mean, maybe the guys send him off with a victory. We'll see. It's going to be a good game, I feel, no matter what. The Fiesta Bowl. You got Kansas State, Oregon. People are really excited about this game. Why? I mean, yeah, it's 2 top 5 teams, but we saw what Baylor's speed did to Kansas State. Ooh. Now, Baylor does have better speed outside, and they have arguably the best wide receiver in the country outside in Terrence Williams, and they have a quarterback that can throw a better deep ball than Marcus Mariota and Nick Florence. But it was the ground game of Baylor that carved up Kansas State. 350 yards of rushing. I mean, they don't even know rushing until they play Oregon. They don't even know speed until they play Oregon. So, I mean, this could get ugly quick. I don't think it gets ugly quick. I think it's close for halftime, but it's gonna be a solid game. I'll do a video on each of the BCS Bowl games. Get a good breakdown of them, but that's gonna be an interesting game for a half. But we'll see how long. We'll see what. Hey, Snyder did a good job against Arkansas last year. We'll see what he can do against Oregon, a much better team than Arkansas team last year. But hey, anything can happen. It's bowl season. So we've got the Sugar Bowl. Sugar Bowl is... Who's playing in the Sugar Bowl? Oh, yeah. That's right. Louisville. Big East champion. We get an AQ. We get to go play against Florida. Talk about a spanking. I mean, this is going to look a lot like the Cincinnati game. This is going to look a lot like I mean, it's not going to look anything like the Utah game against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, but it'll look like that Cincinnati game where Florida just dismantled them. Florida's just going to pound the ball right down this weak defense's throat. And Teddy Bridgewater thought he was injured in the Big East. Just wait till he plays against Florida. I think this one gets ugly quick. The Orange Bowl, NIU versus Florida State. This this one's actually going to be my sleeper pick. Florida State, I already ranted about them and how they're not anything special. Maybe NIU. Who knows? NIU's without their coach. This could be just like that Cincinnati game. But this is a game that don't sleep on. It could be really close and a really good game. Florida's not that special. Florida State's not that special. But I would take Florida State. They're probably going to be a 10-point favorite, at least. And the national championship. So none of my predictions were correct for the bowl games, for the BCS bowl games. The Fiesta Bowl, I didn't have a single team right in that one. Sugar Bowl, I didn't have a single I did have Louisville in that one, so I was right on that. I had Louisville winning the conference for the Big East Conference. And the Orange Bowl, I did have Florida State winning the ACC, but I only had 2 conference champions right out of the 5 major conferences. And Alabama, Notre Dame in the national championship was not what I predicted. I predicted USC and Florida State. Those teams have a combined 7 losses. So my prediction was way off. Last year, I'd say I had a good year predicting last year. I predicted Oklahoma State versus LSU. Oklahoma State lost on the second to last week against Iowa State. Just a crazy situation. And it ended up being LSU versus Alabama instead of LSU versus Oklahoma State. I had LSU winning. They didn't, and Alabama did. So, you know, this year I was way off. But that game's going to be a defensive battle and an interesting game. We'll have a video on that one. I'm not going to go into great detail there. I'm running out of time before I get a rant about Nebraska. So goodbye, college football fans who are not fans of Nebraska, as I will start my Nebraska rant. So get yourself situated here, because that game was ugly. You know, I went into this game thinking, you know, it's tough to beat a good team twice. And Wisconsin's a good team. They're better than the record showed. But so I was like, you know, if we lose this game by 3 points, whatever. It's a disappointment. It's the season's a failure. Yes, the season's a failure no matter what if we lose this game. Once it was up 14-0, Nebraska came back on that great play by Taylor Martinez, made it a 4-point game. I was like, hey, this looks a lot like the last game, except Nebraska's playing a lot better offensively straight from the get-go. But the defense wasn't even nearly as good. The defense got carved up on plays that they had seen in the first game. They saw that sweep in the first game. They saw end arounds in the first game. They just played a lot better. Just the safeties. Damian Stafford and PJ Smith, please graduate. Their tackling angles were awful, but it wasn't their tackling angles. It was mostly their freaking pursuit angles. They didn't cover their gaps, and they got sucked inside too much. I felt like Nebraska overcompensated for the loss of Baker Steinkuhler, and Wisconsin knew that. Matt Canada did a great job. That kid looks like he'll be following in the steps of Paul Chryst. A great job in that game. He didn't do anything special. Everything was working. But you have got to take proper pursuit angles. Wisconsin hammered Nebraska outside from the get-go, which worked open the middle of the field, and they were able to use the inside tackle running game. And they weren't going to try and do that straight from the get-go because they knew that's what Nebraska was going to be playing, and they exposed Nebraska on the outside on their first 3 drives. I mean, it was ugly, ugly. So yeah, the safeties, they've been really poor this year. We'll see if Jonathan Rose can step in next year. Transferred from Alabama, he was a top safety recruit. So there's a good chance he can step in there and play well. And, I mean, the offense, you can say what you want about Taylor Martinez. Yeah, he didn't have a great game. But it's the defense. When you allow 70 points, okay, take away the 14 that really the offense allowed, you're looking at 56 points, which is still really unacceptable. 56 points. Come on. You're supposed to be a defensive genius. I mean, I'll have a video on whether Nebraska should fire Pelini up Pliny. I'll have that video up probably by Friday this week or something like that, sometime before the end of this week. But that was unacceptable. You have got to get your defense prepared. I mean, Nebraska. There's no question Nebraska was fired up for this game, but Wisconsin wanted to prove to the world that we belonged here and we're going to go play in the Rose Bowl. And look at what they did. They completely destroyed Nebraska on national television. Nebraska fell flat on its face yet again. That's 8 times Nebraska's fell flat on its face under Pelini. Those are 21-plus point losses. Only happened 6 times in Callahan era. Now Callahan never played in the conference championship. Yes, he didn't. Oh, he did play in one. I believe it was the 2006 or something. He did play in one, but they lost. This was the worst. The worst loss for Pelini. The losses seem to be getting worse as they go on. UCLA, you lost by 6. Okay. Your defense didn't play very good, but, your offense, all they had to do was get a touchdown. And they would have won by a point in the second half. The Ohio State game, yeah, your defense was awful. Everything was awful. Special teams. Taylor Martinez threw 3 interceptions. Gave Ohio State a lot of points from our offense. That game was bad. 8 yards of carry. And then BAM! BAM! 10 yards of carry. BAM! 56-yard run. 70-yard run. 50-yard run. Stiff arm. Smash to the ground. Oh, look at the safety. Took a poor tackling angle, and he doesn't even touch the running back. Come on. I mean, it was pathetic. You had 2 runners over 200 yards and another guy over 100. That's weak. They only had to pass the ball 10 times. I mean, Wisconsin only has to pass the ball 10 times. That means they're going to win. I mean, that was awful. And we'll see. They got Georgia in the Capital One Bowl. This is going to be a motivation game. I think it's going to be closer than most people think. I still like Georgia as a 10-point favorite. But if Nebraska plays any way they did in that game against Wisconsin, they're going to get smashed in the Citrus Bowl Stadium, or whatever that stadium's called. They're going to get destroyed. But that was unacceptable. Taylor Martinez did have a great run. That was one of the best runs this year. Probably the best quarterback run this year. And Kenny Bell's block. That's the best block I've seen by a wide receiver ever. Ever. I haven't watched a whole lot of football in my life. I mean, I'm young compared to most people, but that was a great block. And college football is becoming a girl sport. When he freaking led with his shoulder, beautiful block, but he hit a guy who just didn't see him, so you're not allowed to hit him. What is he supposed to do, use his freaking arm? I mean, come on, if you would have pushed him down there, that was just a sick hit. It was sick. I watched the slow motion about 50 times, because that was the only thing worth watching in that game, was Taylor Martinez's run and Kenny Bell's block. And then a couple plays later, you had Chris Borland decides to pick up Taylor Martinez and pile drive him into the ground like he's in the freaking WWE or something. And no flag. No flag. Tempers start to flare, and then he comes over and apologizes. I'm so sorry, Taylor, for picking you up and dropping you in the ground. I'm so sorry. Okay, whatever. You apologized. It was weak. It was weak. I mean, that was dirty. That was dirtier than Kenny Bell's hit. He drove him into the ground. There was intent. And that was dirty, and it was just unsportsmanlike. I mean, he should have got kicked out of the game for that. I mean, Ndamukong Suh, if he does that in the NFL, he gets fined. He probably gets ejected. But Chris Borland should be. I mean, I don't think he should be suspended, but he should have got flagged and maybe kicked out of that game, because that was weak. That was really weak. I mean, that's about as bad as throwing a punch. So, and then that's all I've got to really say. I was in shock. You can tell the team was in shock. All my friends were in shock. Everybody was in shock. That was a shocking. I mean, the world was in shock. Any college football fan was in shock. I mean, there's people predicting upsets. I mean, not a whole lot. I'd say about 90% were saying Nebraska. But those who were predicting upsets didn't see it as this bad. And it was ugly. It was ugly. And it should have been ugly enough that you got fired next on the day after. Once your team arrived, if I was Tom Osborne, I would have been, you're done, Pelini. Good job. But hey, it didn't happen. and we'll talk about that in a different video. But that's it for this video. Check back Friday if you're a Husker fan and you want to watch Why Don't We Fire Pliny. I'll have a video up on that. But next Tuesday I'll have my bowl game predictions. So thanks for watching. That is it for this video. Check back Friday. Go Big Red.